The sound of a glass clattering against marble snapped through the restaurant like a gunshot. Every head turned. A young black woman stood frozen beside a polished oak table, her fingers trembling as the water she'd been holding spilled across the white tablecloth. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, as if she were trying to make herself smaller to disappear. Her hair was neatly braided back, her dress simple and clean but worn at the seams. She couldn't have been more than 22. And towering over her was the waiter. "Are you deaf?" he barked, his voice loud enough to carry across the entire dining hall. "I said this section is not for people like you." A sharp, collective inhale rippled through the room. The girl swallowed hard, her lips parted, but no sound came out at first. When she finally spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm sorry, I've been waiting for 40 minutes. I just wanted to order." The waiter laughed, not a nervous laugh, not an awkward one. This was sharp, cruel, designed to cut. "Order," he scoffed. "With what money? You think this is some charity kitchen? Look around." He gestured dramatically at the chandeliers above them, the crystal glasses, the men in tailored suits and women draped in designer silk. "This place has standards." A man at a nearby table shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. A woman across the room raised her phone slightly, pretending to check a message while clearly recording. Someone else whispered, "That's so messed up," but didn't stand. The girl's face burned. Her eyes glistened as she clutched the strap of her worn handbag, knuckles whitening. "I can pay," she said, a crack forming in her voice. "I just want something small, please." The waiter leaned in closer, lowering his voice just enough to drip with venom while still being heard. "Listen carefully," he said. "People like you come in here all the time thinking you deserve the same treatment as real customers. You don't. Now take your little bag and go before you embarrass yourself even more." A few people gasped. Most stayed silent. The girl's chest tightened. Her breathing grew shallow. She looked around at the faces staring at her like she was some kind of spectacle. No one met her eyes for long. No one stepped forward. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered, more to herself than to him. The waiter straightened, clearly enjoying the power he held in that moment. "You did something wrong the second you walked in here," he snapped. "This isn't your world." The words hit harder than a slap. Her hands shook now, tears blurring her vision. She tried to blink them back, tried to hold on to her dignity, but it was slipping through her fingers with every passing second. And that's when it happened. From the far corner of the restaurant, a pair of calm, observant eyes lifted from a folded newspaper. The owner of those eyes had been watching everything. Every word. Every sneer, every cruel second of silence from the crowd. But no one noticed them yet. Not the waiter, not the customers, not even the girl standing at the center of the humiliation. Because if they had, they would have realized that the most powerful person in the room had already made a decision. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Question of the day: have you ever been judged, ignored, or humiliated just because of how you looked, where you came from, or what someone assumed about you? Tell us your story in the comments and let us know where you're watching from today. Your voice matters. Back in the restaurant, the waiter folded his arms, waiting for the girl to leave. She didn't move. Her legs felt like stone. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. "I just needed one meal," she said softly. "Just one." The waiter rolled his eyes dramatically. "Oh, don't start crying now," he said. "You're making a scene." A tear escaped anyway, sliding down her cheek. The crowd watched and watched and watched. Then a chair scraped gently against the floor, slow, deliberate. The sound cut through the tension like a blade. The waiter turned, irritated. "Sir, this doesn't concern you," but the man didn't speak yet. He simply stood, tall, composed, impeccably dressed, but not flashy. His presence was quiet and commanding. The kind that didn't need to shout to be heard. The girl didn't see him. Her gaze was fixed on the floor now, shame weighing her down like chains. The waiter scoffed again, unaware. "If you don't leave right now," he snapped at her, "I'll have security escort you out." That was the breaking point. Her shoulders sagged. She nodded faintly, turning as if to leave defeated, crushed, believing that once again the world had confirmed what it always seemed to tell her, that she didn't belong. But just as she took her first step toward the exit, a calm voice spoke from behind her. "That won't be necessary." The entire restaurant fell silent. The waiter frowned, spinning toward the voice. "Excuse me?" The man folded his newspaper carefully, placing it on the table beside him. "I said," he repeated evenly, "that won't be necessary." There was something in his tone that made even the air feel heavier. The waiter laughed nervously. "Sir, this is staff business. Please sit down." The man's eyes flicked briefly to the girl, still trembling, still fighting tears, then back to the waiter. "No," he said quietly. "This is a matter of humanity." A murmur rippled through the room, the waiter's face flushed with annoyance. You don't understand what's going on here. The man took one step forward. Oh, he replied calmly, I understand perfectly. The girl finally looked up. Their eyes met for a split second, and in that moment something shifted, because what she saw wasn't pity. It was recognition, and what no one in that restaurant knew yet, what the waiter would soon regret with every fiber of his being, was that this man wasn't just another customer. He was the billionaire reviewer whose single word could build reputations or destroy them overnight. And he had seen everything. But before justice could unfold, before truth could be revealed, we need to understand how this young woman ended up here in the first place. So let's go back to how this story truly began this morning. The day had begun long before the sun rose. A thin gray light crept through the cracked window of a small, aging apartment on the east side of the city, where the walls bore peeling paint and the pipes groaned like tired old men. The building had once been painted a hopeful yellow decades ago, but now it stood dull and forgotten, much like the people who lived inside it. In apartment 3B, Amara Johnson stirred awake on a narrow mattress laid directly on the floor. She was 22 years old, but life had already pressed lines of quiet exhaustion into her face. Still, there was something soft about her, something unbroken. Her skin glowed warmly even in the dim morning light, and her eyes, when they opened, carried a gentleness that hardship hadn't managed to steal. Amara sat up slowly, careful not to disturb the small figure curled beside her. Her younger brother, Malik, only 10 years old, slept fitfully under a thin blanket. His breathing was shallow, uneven. Every few seconds he coughed, a dry, painful sound that made Amara's chest tighten. She reached out instinctively, placing the back of her hand against his forehead. Still warm, too warm, her jaw clenched. "Not today," she whispered. "Please, not today." Amara slipped quietly from the mattress and padded across the cold linoleum floor. The apartment was barely more than 2 rooms, a cramped bedroom and a kitchen that doubled as a living space. A single light flickered when she turned it on, buzzing softly like it might give up at any moment. On the counter sat a stack of unopened mail. Past due notices, medical bills, final warnings. She didn't open them. She already knew what they said. Instead, she filled a chipped kettle with water and placed it on the stove. As it heated, she moved with practiced efficiency, washing her face in the sink, tying her braids back neatly, smoothing down her only decent dress. It was navy blue, second-hand, but clean and pressed. She took pride in that. Dignity, she believed, didn't cost money. The kettle whistled. She poured the water over a single tea bag, stretching it to make 2 cups. One for her, one for Malik later with a spoonful of honey she'd been saving. As she waited, her gaze drifted to the photograph taped to the fridge. It was old. The corners were curling. A younger Amara stood between her parents, all of them smiling, arms wrapped tight around each other. That was before the accident, before the hospital rooms, before her mother's passing and her father's quiet disappearance into grief and eventually nowhere. She touched the photo gently. "I've got him," she murmured. "I promise." A soft cough echoed from the bedroom. Amara hurried back, kneeling beside Malik. "Hey," she whispered, "morning superhero." His eyes fluttered open. He tried to smile but failed halfway. "Morning," he croaked. "You gotta work," she nodded, brushing his hair back. "Just for a little while. Ms. Turner from next door is going to check on you, okay?" He frowned weakly. "You didn't eat yesterday." Amara forced a smile. "I'm not hungry." They both knew it wasn't true. She helped him sit up, pressing the warm tea into his hands. He sipped slowly, wincing as he swallowed. "Amara," he said quietly, "what if the medicine?" She cut him off gently. "We'll get it." "But the pharmacy," I said, "we'll get it," she repeated, firmer now, though her eyes betrayed her fear. Malik searched her face. "How?" Amara looked away for just a second. "I'll figure something out." She always said that. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. After tucking him back in and leaving instructions for Ms. Turner, Amara stepped out into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind her, and for a moment she leaned her forehead against the chipped wood. She breathed in, then out. Outside, the neighborhood was already stirring. Sirens wailed in the distance. A bus hissed to a stop. A woman argued with her phone. Life moved fast here, too fast to stop for people like Amara. As she walked, she greeted familiar faces. "Morning, baby," an elderly man called from the stoop. "Morning, Mr. Lewis," she replied warmly. A group of kids ran past her, laughing, backpacks bouncing. She smiled at them even as her heart ached. She had dropped out of college 2 semesters ago when Malik got sick. Tuition could wait, family couldn't. Amara worked 2 part-time jobs, cleaning offices at night and assisting at a daycare on weekends. She was never lazy, never careless, but effort didn't always equal escape. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A text message. Pharmacy, prescription ready. Balance due $86.47. Her stomach dropped. She stopped walking. $86. She had 12. Amara closed her eyes. She thought of Malik's labored breathing, his shaking hands, the way he tried to be brave for her. She thought of the eviction notice tucked under her mattress, the landlord's last warning. She thought of how tired she was. Then she straightened. There was one more thing she could try, one last place. It was risky, humiliating even. A place where she knew she would be judged the second she walked in. But desperate times didn't leave room for pride. She turned toward the subway station, her steps slow but determined. As she descended into the underground, Amara whispered a quiet prayer. "Just one good thing today," she said. "That's all I'm asking." She had no idea that before the day was over, her life would collide with cruelty, and then with something far more powerful, and all of it would begin with a single step through a restaurant door. The subway ride felt longer than usual. Amara sat rigidly on the plastic seat, her hands folded in her lap, fingers twisting together as the train rattled through the dark tunnel. Every screech of metal against metal seemed to echo the thoughts racing through her mind. $86. The number repeated itself like a cruel chant. Across from her, a man in a suit scrolled through his phone, earbuds in, oblivious. A woman beside him slept with her head against the window. Life moved on, unaware that Amara's entire world was hanging by a thread. She pulled her phone from her bag and opened her banking app again, even though she already knew the balance. $12.19. Her chest tightened. She closed the app quickly, as if looking at it too long might somehow make it worse. Malik's cough echoed in her memory, sharp, wet, wrong. The doctor's voice from 2 weeks ago followed it. If he misses another dose, the infection could worsen. Worsen. That word terrified her. Amara pressed her lips together, blinking back tears. Crying wouldn't help. She needed a solution now. The train lurched to a stop, her station. She stepped onto the platform and climbed the stairs into the morning light. The city greeted her with its usual indifference, honking horns, rushing feet, flashing advertisements promising luxury and comfort she'd never known. She walked toward the pharmacy first. Maybe, just maybe, they'd let her make a partial payment. The bell chimed as she pushed the door open. The pharmacist, a tired-looking woman in her 40s, glanced up. "Prescription pickup?" she asked. "Yes," Amara said softly, "for Malik Johnson." The woman typed for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, balance due is $86.47. Amara swallowed. I only have 12 right now, but my brother really needs it. Is there any way?" The pharmacist sighed, not unkindly, just worn down. "I'm sorry," she said. "We've already extended the payment window twice. I could lose my job." Amara nodded, shame washing over her. "I understand," she whispered. She turned away before the tears could fall, her shoulders sagging as she stepped back onto the sidewalk. One door closed. She checked her phone again, scrolling through contacts. Her aunt in Ohio already struggling herself. A former coworker had stopped replying weeks ago. Her college friend moved overseas. She dialed anyway. Voicemail. She hung up without leaving a message. Next, she opened her email. Subject: final notice eviction proceedings. Her breath caught. She leaned against the brick wall of the pharmacy, the cold seeping through her thin dress. Her vision blurred as the weight of it all crashed down at once. Sick brother, no medicine, no money, no home. "I can't do this," she whispered. Her phone buzzed again, another message, this one from her landlord. "Landlord, rent is past due. If payment isn't made by tomorrow, locks will be changed. Tomorrow." Amara slid down the wall, sitting on the sidewalk with her head in her hands. People stepped around her without a second glance. For the first time that day, she cried. Not loud, not dramatically, just silent tears slipping down her cheeks, dripping onto her hands. She wiped them away quickly, embarrassed even though no one was watching. "I have to do something," she said aloud. There was one more option, one she hated, the restaurant, a luxury place downtown, white tablecloths, expensive menus. The kind of place she had only ever seen through glass windows. But today, just for today, they were hosting a charity tasting event. Open seating for a limited time, no reservations required. She'd seen the sign posted near the subway entrance that morning. Community tasting walk INS welcome. She didn't want a handout. She wanted to ask the manager about a small job, anything. Cleaning, dishwashing, even working for a meal. Restaurants wasted food all the time. One meal could mean Malik eating tonight. One paycheck could mean his medicine. But she also knew what walking into a place like that meant. The looks, the whispers, the assumptions. She'd felt them before in stores and offices, in spaces where wealth was the unspoken gatekeeper. Still, she stood. She smoothed her dress, wiped her face, and lifted her chin. Her phone buzzed again. A voicemail notification. She opened it. Malik's voice thin but trying to sound cheerful. "Hey, Amara. Ms. Turner says I gotta rest. Don't worry about me, okay? I'm okay, I love you." Her heart shattered all over again. "I love you too," she whispered to the phone. Decision made. She checked the address again. It was only 6 blocks away. Each step toward it felt heavier than the last. Her palms grew sweaty, her stomach twisted into knots. What if they laughed at her? What if they kicked her out? What if she failed him? By the time the building came into view, her legs trembled. The restaurant stood like a palace of glass and stone, sunlight glinting off its tall windows. Well-dressed patrons flowed in and out, laughing easily, unaware of how much courage it took for someone like Amara to even approach the door. She stopped across the street. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. A young black woman with tired eyes, worn shoes, and a heart full of fear and love. "I can do this," she told herself, because the alternative was unthinkable. She took a deep breath and crossed the street. The closer Amara got to the restaurant, the slower her steps became. It wasn't distance holding her back, it was fear. The building rose before her like a monument to everything she wasn't supposed to belong to. Polished stone, floor-to-ceiling glass, a gold-lettered name above the entrance that practically whispered exclusive. Inside, she could see crystal chandeliers glowing softly even in the daylight, their light reflecting off spotless surfaces and impeccably dressed patrons. She stopped at the edge of the sidewalk. Across the street, a valet laughed with a couple stepping out of a luxury car. A doorman held the door open with a practiced smile. Everyone moved with confidence like they knew they had the right to be there. Amara looked down at her shoes. They were clean, scuffed but clean. She adjusted the strap of her handbag and smoothed her dress again, though her hands shook as she did it. "You're not doing anything wrong," she told herself. "You're just asking for help." Still, her heart pounded as if she were about to step into danger. She thought of Malik, of the way he'd tried to sound brave in that voicemail, of the way his small hand felt in hers when the fever spiked at night, of the fear in his eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. Hope flickered. It was small, but it was enough. Amara crossed the street. Each step felt like she was walking between two worlds. On one side, everything she knew, scraping by, being invisible, learning to survive on less than nothing. On the other, a world that judged worth by appearance and comfort by price tags. She reached the door. For a moment, she just stood there. The glass reflected her back at herself. Her posture straightened unconsciously, as if she could will confidence into existence. "Just breathe," she told herself. She pulled the door open. Cool air washed over her face, carrying the scent of expensive perfume and freshly baked bread. The soft clink of silverware and low murmur of conversation filled the space. Immediately she felt it. The shift. Heads turned. Eyes lingered, some curious, some dismissive. She stepped inside, letting the door close quietly behind her. The floor beneath her feet gleamed. Her worn shoes sounded louder here, each step echoing slightly. She became acutely aware of her hands, her posture, her breathing. "Don't rush," she reminded herself. "You belong anywhere you choose to stand." A host glanced up from the podium, eyebrows lifting almost imperceptibly before settling into a neutral expression. "Can I help you?" he asked. "Yes," Amara said, her voice steady despite the tightness in her chest. "I wanted to speak to the manager if possible." The host hesitated. "Do you have a reservation?" "No." His eyes flicked briefly to her dress, then back to his screen. "We're quite busy." "I understand," she said quickly. "I just need a moment. It's important." Another pause. He exhaled, then gestured vaguely. "You can wait over there." Over there turned out to be an empty two-top table near the back, close enough to see everything, far enough to be overlooked. She thanked him softly and walked toward it, her pulse racing. As she sat, she noticed the contrast more sharply. To her left, a man laughed loudly as he ordered wine without glancing at the price. To her right, a woman complained about the temperature of her soup. And there she was counting the minutes, counting her courage, counting the last scraps of hope she had left. She folded her hands in her lap and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. A waiter brushed past her without a word. 15 minutes. Her stomach growled quietly. She pressed her lips together, embarrassed even though no one noticed. She raised her hands slightly as another waiter walked by. "Excuse me," she said gently. He didn't stop. She lowered her hand, cheeks warming. "Be patient," she told herself. "You knew this wouldn't be easy. 20 minutes. She watched plates of food pass her table, steaming, fragrant, generous. Her mouth watered involuntarily. She didn't need a feast, just something small, just enough. Finally, a waiter approached her table, not with a menu, with a look. "What do you want?" he asked flatly. Relief flooded her, followed immediately by nerves. "Hi," she said. "I was hoping to order something simple." And also, if possible, speak to the manager about work, any kind of work. The waiter frowned. He glanced at her table, empty, then at her again. You ordering or begging? He muttered. Her heart sank. I can pay, she said quickly. He cut her off. This isn't that kind of place, she swallowed hard. I saw the sign, the community tasting. That's for invited guests, he snapped. Not walk-ins who can't afford the menu. Her throat tightened. I just need one meal, she said quietly. For my brother, he's sick. Something flickered in his eyes, not compassion, annoyance. Look, he said, voice lowering but sharpening, I don't have time for this. A couple nearby glanced over. Heat crept up Amara's neck. I'm not trying to cause trouble, she said. Then leave, he said, before you embarrass yourself. The words hit harder than she expected. Her fingers curled into her palms. She looked around, hoping stupidly that someone might meet her eyes, might say something. They didn't. Fear pressed in on her chest, thick and suffocating, but hope, small, stubborn hope, still burned, because she hadn't come this far to turn back now. She drew in a shaky breath. I'll wait, she said, please. The waiter stared at her for a long moment, jaw tightening, and then his lips curled into a smile that held no kindness at all. That was when the real humiliation began. The waiter didn't leave. He stood there beside Amara's table, arms crossed, his body angled just enough to block her from the rest of the room, as if he were guarding something valuable from contamination. You're not waiting, he said. You're leaving. Amara looked up at him slowly. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she forced her voice to remain calm. I was told I could sit here, she said. I'm not bothering anyone. The waiter let out a short, humorless laugh. You're bothering me, he replied. And you're making other guests uncomfortable. He glanced deliberately around the room, drawing attention to her. A few heads turned, a few whispers followed. Amara felt the heat of their gazes like a spotlight. I'm sorry, she said softly. I don't understand what I've done wrong. The waiter leaned closer, lowering his voice, but not enough. People like you always play dumb, he said. You walk into places you can't afford, then act surprised when you're asked to leave. Her chest tightened. I can afford something small, she said. And even if I couldn't, that doesn't means exactly that, he cut in sharply. This isn't a shelter, it's a high-end restaurant. A man at the next table shifted in his seat. His wife touched his arm, whispering something. Neither of them spoke up. Amara's fingers trembled on the edge of the table. I just wanted to eat, she said, her voice cracking despite her effort to hold it together. I haven't eaten since yesterday. The waiter straightened, his face hardening. And whose fault is that? He asked loudly. A hush crept across the nearby tables. That's not my problem, he continued. You should have thought about that before coming here. Her eyes burned. I didn't come here to be disrespected, she said. I came because I was desperate. Desperate people don't belong here, he snapped. They belong in places made for them. The implication hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. Amara's breath hitched. Please don't talk to me like that, she whispered. The waiter scoffed. Like what? Honest? He turned slightly, addressing the room now. Every day it's the same thing, he said. Someone comes in thinking they can just sit down and get a free meal because they have a sad story. That's not true, Amara said, standing despite the shake in her legs. I never asked for anything free. He laughed again, loud enough that several people turned fully in their chairs. Then why are you here? He demanded. Because you like the decor? Because you think pretending will make you belong? Her face flushed hot, her ears rang. I belong wherever I choose to sit, she said quietly. The waiter's eyes narrowed. Not here, he said. A phone lifted somewhere behind her. Someone was recording now. She could feel it without seeing it. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. I'm asking you, she said, voice barely steady, to let me order, that's all. He shook his head slowly, mock sympathy etched across his face. I can't let you waste my time, he said, or my table. Your table, she repeated. Yes, he said sharply, and you're done wasting it. He reached for the water glass in front of her and slid it off the table. It tipped, water spilled, the sharp clatter echoed through the room, gasps followed. Amara froze. That's enough, the waiter snapped. Get up. She stared at the water soaking into the tablecloth like a spreading stain, just like the shame flooding her chest. I didn't mean to. I don't care what you meant, he said. You're causing a scene. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm not, she whispered. You are. The waiter's face reddened. Don't raise your voice at me, he barked. I'm not raising my voice, she said, tears slipping free now. I'm begging you to stop. The word begging tasted bitter. He leaned in, voice dripping with disdain. You people always end up begging, he said. It's what you're good at. The silence that followed was deafening. No one moved. No one spoke. The cruelty sat in the open, unchallenged. Amara's shoulders trembled. Her chest hurt like it might cave in. She looked around again at the faces watching her break in real time. Nothing. She felt small, exposed, stripped of every layer of dignity she'd tried so hard to hold on to. "I'll go," she said finally, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to upset anyone." She reached for her bag. The waiter straightened, satisfied. "Good," he said. "Do us all a favor." She turned toward the exit, her vision blurred with tears, and that's when she heard it. A chair scraping against the floor, slow, intentional, a sound that didn't carry anger, only certainty. The waiter turned, irritation flashing across his face. "Sir," he said sharply, "this doesn't concern you." But someone had stood, someone who had been watching from the beginning, and the air in the room shifted just slightly, enough to make hearts pause. Amara's hand hovered over the strap of her bag. She hadn't put it on yet. Some small, stubborn part of her, something deep and aching, was still hoping someone would say something. Anything. A single voice to break the weight pressing down on her chest. No one did. The room remained frozen, suspended in a silence that felt thicker than the waiter's insults. It wrapped around her like a suffocating blanket, heavy with judgment and discomfort. She lowered her hands slowly. Her legs trembled. "I'm sorry," she said again, though the words felt hollow now. "I'll leave." The waiter didn't respond right away. He watched her, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line of satisfaction. "That would be best," he said at last. "We don't need this kind of disturbance." Disturbance. The word echoed in her head. She had been quiet, polite, patient, and still she was the problem. Amara took a step toward the exit, then another. Each step felt like she was walking away from more than just a table. She was walking away from hope. From the belief that asking for help didn't have to come with humiliation attached. Her vision blurred completely now. Tears streamed freely, unstoppable. She wiped at her face with the back of her hand, embarrassed by the sight of her own breaking. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, not sure who she was apologizing to anymore. The waiter clicked his tongue impatiently. "You don't need to perform," he said. "Just go." That was it. Something inside her cracked. Her shoulders shook as a sob escaped her, soft, broken, uncontrollable. She pressed her lips together, trying to muffle it, but it was too late. She had lost the fight. "I didn't come here to be treated like this," she said through tears. "I just needed help. My brother is sick. He needs his medicine." Her voice wavered, the truth spilling out despite her efforts to keep it contained. "Please," she said, "I don't have anyone else." The waiter's expression didn't change. "Not my problem," he said flatly. The words landed like a final blow. She stood there, shaking, feeling utterly alone in a room full of people. She looked around one last time, at the man who had earlier shifted in his seat, now staring at his plate, at the woman who had been recording, now pretending to text, at the couple whispering, still whispering, never acting. The silence was louder than any insult. It told her exactly what she feared most, that her pain didn't matter, that she didn't matter. Her chest hurt so badly she thought she might collapse. She placed a hand over her heart, breathing shallowly. "I can't do this," she thought. "I've failed him." Malik's face flashed in her mind. The way he'd smiled for her that morning, the way he trusted her completely. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, this time to him. She turned fully toward the door now, every muscle heavy with defeat. One step, two. The waiter spoke again. "And don't come back," he added. "This isn't your world." Her knees nearly buckled. She reached the aisle. That was when she heard it, not loud, not angry, just calm. "That's enough." The words cut through the silence like a blade through cloth. Amara froze mid-step, so did everyone else. The waiter turned sharply, irritation flashing across his face. "Sir," he said, clearly annoyed, "this doesn't concern you." The man who had spoken stepped forward slowly. He was tall, his posture relaxed but commanding. His hair was streaked with gray, his expression composed. He wore a simple but impeccably tailored suit, nothing flashy, nothing loud. Power didn't always announce itself, sometimes it whispered. "I believe it does concern me," the man said evenly. The waiter scoffed. "We're handling a situation." The man's gaze shifted briefly to Amara. She hadn't moved. Tears still clung to her lashes. Her shoulders were drawn inward as if bracing for another blow. His eyes softened. "Miss," he said gently, "are you all right?" No one had asked her that, not once. Her throat tightened. She tried to speak, but only a broken sound came out. She shook her head. The man nodded slowly, as if that answer told him everything he needed to know. He turned back to the waiter. "This young woman has been treated with unnecessary cruelty," he said. "I suggest you stop." The waiter laughed loud and dismissive. "Look," he said, "with all due respect, you don't know what you're talking about." The man didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer. He didn't threaten. He simply stood there, unmoving, unshaken. "I know exactly what I'm talking about," he replied. The waiter rolled his eyes. "Sir, if you don't sit down, I'll have security escort both of you out." A murmur rippled through the room. Amara's heart pounded again, this time not just with fear, but with something unfamiliar. Was someone really standing up for her? The man glanced at her once more. "You don't have to leave," he said softly, her breath caught. "But if you'd like," he continued, "you may sit. I'll handle this." She stared at him, disbelief warring with fear. The waiter sneered. "This is ridiculous." He didn't know, not yet, but he was about to, because the calm man in front of him wasn't just another customer, and the silence that followed was about to break loudly. The man took one step forward, not aggressively, not defensively, just enough to place himself between Amara and the waiter. It was a small movement, but it changed everything. The waiter straightened his shoulders, clearly irritated now. "Sir," he said sharply, "I've already told you this doesn't involve you." The man clasped his hands loosely in front of him, his expression calm, almost patient. "And I've already told you," he replied, "that it does." Amara stood behind him, unsure what to do. Her legs still felt weak, her chest tight from crying, but for the first time since she'd walked into the restaurant, she didn't feel completely exposed. Man glanced back at her. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "Just take a breath." She did, shakily. The waiter scoffed again, his confidence bolstered by the watching crowd. "Look around," he said, gesturing broadly. "Everyone else understands how things work here." The man followed his gesture, his eyes moving slowly across the room. He saw the guests pretending not to watch, the phones half hidden in hands, the uncomfortable shifting, the guilty silence. Then his gaze returned to the waiter. "Yes," he said quietly, "I see that very clearly." The waiter's jaw tightened. "This woman disrupted service," he said. "She refused to leave when asked." "She asked for food," the man corrected, "and for help." "So," the waiter snapped, "that's not my responsibility." The man nodded slowly, as if absorbing the words. "Interesting," he said. "Then tell me, whose responsibility is it to treat another human being with respect?" The waiter laughed, a sharp, mocking sound. "This isn't a philosophy class," he said. "It's a business." "A business," the man repeated. "That serves people." "Yes," the waiter said impatiently, "paying people." The man's eyes flicked to Amara again. "Did she threaten anyone?" he asked calmly. "No," he answered himself. "Did she shout, 'damage property', cause a scene?" Again he paused. "No." He turned back to the waiter. "Then the only scene here," he said, "is the one you created." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The waiter's face flushed. "Sir," he said, voice rising, "you are seriously overstepping." The man didn't react. "Step aside," the waiter added, "or I'll call security." Amara's stomach dropped. She tugged gently at the man's sleeve. "It's okay," she whispered. "I don't want to cause trouble." He turned to her fully now. "You're not causing trouble," he said. "You're standing in it." Her eyes filled again, but this time not just with pain, with relief. The waiter huffed. "Unbelievable." He raised his hand, signaling toward the front of the restaurant. "Security," he called. No one moved yet. The man tilted his head slightly, studying the waiter as if he were a puzzle. "Before you do that," he said evenly, "may I ask you a question?" The waiter crossed his arms. "Make it quick." "What is your name?" the man asked. The waiter blinked, caught off guard. "Why does that matter?" "It matters," the man replied, "because names are tied to accountability." The waiter hesitated, then smirked. "Ethan," he said. "Ethan Miller." The man nodded once. "Thank you, Ethan." The way he said it, calm, deliberate, sent a strange chill through the air. "And how long have you worked here, Ethan?" he asked. The waiter scoffed. "Long enough." "Long enough to represent this establishment," the man said. "Long enough to decide who belongs and who doesn't." "That's my job," Ethan snapped. "To protect the standards." "Standards," the man echoed. "Not people." The crowd shifted again. Someone near the back whispered, "Who is that guy?" Amara noticed the whispers, the subtle change in posture from the other guests. Something was shifting. She could feel it. Ethan sneered. "You're just another customer. Sit down and enjoy your meal." The man smiled faintly. "That's where you're mistaken," he said, Ethan's brows furrowed. "Excuse me." The man took a step closer, not threatening but firm. "I am not just another customer," he said quietly. A hush fell over the room. Amara's breath caught. The man straightened his jacket. "And if you continue to speak to this young woman the way you have," he continued, "you will regret it." Ethan laughed nervously. "Is that a threat?" "No," the man replied. "It's a courtesy." The tension was unbearable now, tight as a wire stretched to its limit. The waiter opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a voice from another table whispered loudly enough to carry. "Wait, isn't that—" The whisper died mid-sentence. Eyes widened, phones lowered. Ethan noticed it too. "What?" he snapped. "What is it?" The man exhaled slowly, as if deciding whether it was time. He looked once more at Amara. "You've been very brave," he said. Then he turned back to Ethan. "And now," he added calmly, "it's time for the truth." The silence that followed felt unnatural, like the entire restaurant had collectively stopped breathing. Ethan shifted on his feet, suddenly aware that the attention in the room was no longer on Amara, but on him. What truth? He demanded, his earlier confidence wavering just slightly. The man reached into the inside pocket of his jacket with unhurried precision. Amara's heart jumped. For a brief, irrational second, she wondered if she should step back. Instead, the man withdrew a simple leather wallet. He opened it and held up an identification card, not just any card. A platinum-embossed badge bearing the name of the restaurant group etched in elegant lettering. Ethan's face drained of color. "I don't believe this," he muttered. The man's voice remained calm, measured, yet carried effortlessly across the room. "My name is Jonathan Hale," he said. "I am the majority owner of this restaurant and 12 others like it." A collective gasp swept through the dining hall. Someone dropped a fork. Another whispered, "Oh my God." A chair scraped loudly as someone stood in shock. Ethan staggered back half a step. That's impossible," he stammered. You would have been announced." Jonathan's lips curved into a faint, knowing smile. "I often am," he said. "Today I was." Amara stared at him, her mind struggling to catch up. "Owner," the waiter's mouth opened and closed, words failing him. Jonathan continued. "I was here this morning in an unofficial capacity," he said, "observing, listening, watching how my staff treats people when they believe no one important is looking." The room was so quiet now that Amara could hear her own heartbeat. Ethan swallowed hard. "Sir, I didn't know." Jonathan raised a hand. "Of course you didn't," he said. "That's the point." Ethan straightened abruptly, scrambling for composure. "There's been a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "I was simply enforcing policy." Jonathan turned slightly, his gaze sweeping the room. "Did anyone here hear this young woman ask for something free?" he asked. No one answered. "Did anyone hear her raise her voice?" he continued. Silence. "Did anyone witness her disrespecting staff or guests?" Still nothing. Jonathan's eyes returned to Ethan. "Then what policy were you enforcing?" he asked quietly. Ethan's hands trembled. I was protecting the brand," he said weakly. Jonathan's expression hardened for the first time. "The brand," he repeated, "is not chandeliers or tablecloths." He gestured toward Amara. "It is how you treat people like her." Amara's breath hitched. Jonathan turned to her now, his voice softening. "Miss," he said, "would you mind telling me your name?" She hesitated, then answered quietly. Amara Johnson." "Thank you, Amara," he said, "and thank you for staying." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks again, but these were different now. Ethan dropped his gaze. Jonathan faced him fully once more. "Ethan Miller," he said, "effective immediately, your employment here is terminated." A sharp intake of breath echoed through the room. Ethan's head snapped up. "You can't do that." Jonathan's voice didn't rise. "I can," he said, "and I just did." Ethan's face flushed deep red. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "One complaint and you're throwing away my career?" Jonathan's eyes were cold now. "This is not one complaint," he said. "This is a reflection of character." He gestured subtly toward the crowd. "And you weren't alone, you were simply the loudest." Ethan's shoulders sagged. "I was following orders," he said desperately. "Then the orders were wrong," Jonathan replied. "And so were you." Security finally approached, but this time they didn't look at Amara, they looked at Ethan. "Sir," one of them said carefully, "we'll need you to come with us." Ethan looked around, panic setting in. "This isn't fair," he muttered. Jonathan met his gaze. "Neither was what you did," he said. As Ethan was escorted away, the room buzzed with hushed conversation. Jonathan turned back to Amara. "You should never have been treated that way," he said. "And I'm deeply sorry." She shook her head, overwhelmed. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't mean to cause." "You didn't cause anything," Jonathan interrupted gently. "You revealed it." He gestured to a nearby table. "Please," he said, "sit." She hesitated. Then slowly she sat, the same table, the one she'd almost been forced to leave. Jonathan took the seat across from her. A manager approached nervously. "Mr. Hale," she said, "what would you like us to do?" Jonathan didn't look away from Amara. "I want you to serve her," he said, "with the same care and respect you would give any honored guest." "Yes, sir," the manager said quickly. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. "Amara," he said, "I suspect you didn't come here just for a meal." Her throat tightened. "My brother," she said. "He's sick. I just needed." Jonathan nodded. "Then let's take care of that," he said. The words felt unreal because everything had just changed. The restaurant no longer felt like a courtroom. It felt like a reckoning. As Ethan disappeared through the side door with security, a strange stillness settled over the room, heavy, reflective, almost ashamed. Conversations didn't resume. Silverware lay untouched. People who had watched silently now avoided each other's eyes. Jonathan Hale remained seated across from Amara, his posture relaxed, his attention fully on her, as if the rest of the room had ceased to exist. She sat stiffly at first, hands folded in her lap, unsure of what to do with herself. Part of her expected someone to wake her up to tell her this was some cruel dream. "I don't know how to thank you," she said finally, her voice small. "I didn't come here expecting any of this." Jonathan gave a soft, understanding smile. "Most people who truly need help never do," he replied. "That's why they're often ignored." A server approached the table, this time carefully, respectfully. "Ms. Johnson," she said gently, "may I bring you something to eat?" Amara hesitated instinctively. Old habits died hard. "I don't want to cause trouble," she said. Jonathan shook his head. "You're not causing trouble," he said. "You're being cared for." She nodded slowly. "Then soup," she said, "if that's okay." The server smiled. "Of course." As she walked away, Amara let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Jonathan studied her quietly. "Tell me about your brother," he said. Amara swallowed, then spoke. "His name is Malik. He's 10. He's strong, stronger than he should have to be. He's been sick for months. Infection. The medicine is expensive." Her voice cracked. "I tried everything. I worked 2 jobs. I sold my laptop. I skipped meals. I just ran out of time." Jonathan listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once. "Do you have the prescription information?" he asked. She blinked. "Yes, on my phone." "May I see it?" She handed it to him, hands trembling slightly. Jonathan read it carefully, then handed it back. "This will be taken care of today," he said. "In full." Her eyes widened. "I can't ask you to." "You didn't," he said gently. "I'm offering." Tears streamed freely now. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't even know how." "You don't need to," Jonathan said. "Just focus on your brother." He gestured subtly toward the manager, who approached again, pale and nervous. "I want the remaining staff here today to attend mandatory training," Jonathan said calmly. "Effective immediately." "Yes, sir," the manager replied. "And I want a written report of what happened here today," he continued. "Every detail. This isn't ending with one termination." The manager nodded quickly. "Understood." Jonathan turned back to Amara. "There's more," he said, "if you're willing to listen." She nodded, wiping her cheeks. "I don't want this to be a one-time fix," he said. "Temporary help doesn't change lives." Her heart pounded. "I run a foundation," Jonathan continued. "It focuses on education, healthcare, and housing for families who have fallen through the cracks." Amara stared at him, stunned. "I want to help you and your brother long-term," he said. She shook her head slowly, overwhelmed. I don't deserve all that," she said. Jonathan's expression softened. "You deserve safety," he replied. "You deserve dignity, and you deserve opportunity." She pressed a hand to her mouth, sobbing quietly now. "What about rent?" she whispered. "We're being evicted." Jonathan nodded as if he'd expected that. "My team will handle that," he said. "You'll be moved into stable housing by the end of the week." Her breath caught painfully. "And your education," he continued. "You mentioned college. Would you want to go back?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "More than anything." "Then you will," Jonathan said. "Tuition covered, books, support." She shook her head again, disbelief written across her face. "This doesn't feel real," she said. Jonathan smiled gently. "It will," he said. "Give it time." The server returned with a bowl of soup and a plate of bread, placing them carefully in front of Amara. She stared at the food for a moment, then looked up at Jonathan. "Can I take some to my brother?" she asked. Jonathan's smile widened. "Take all of it," he said, "and more." She laughed softly through tears, a sound that surprised even her. As she ate slowly, warmth spreading through her body, something else began to heal too. The weight she'd been carrying alone for years began, just a little, to lift. Before she left, Jonathan stood with her. "I want you to know something," he said. "What happened today wasn't your fault," she nodded. "And it wasn't just about you," he continued. "It was about showing everyone in this room what silence costs." Several guests nearby lowered their heads. Jonathan extended his hand. "We'll be in touch," he said. "You're not alone anymore." Amara took his hand. For the first time in a very long while, she believed it. 3 years later, the morning sunlight streamed through wide, clean windows, spilling across polished wooden floors and walls painted in warm, calming colors. The apartment no longer smelled of dampness or rusted pipes. It smelled like fresh coffee and possibility. Amara Johnson stood by the window, adjusting the strap of her bag as she watched her younger brother tie his sneakers on the couch. "Malik," she called gently, smiling, "you're going to be late." "I'm coming," he laughed, hopping up with a burst of energy that still amazed her every day. Malik was taller now, stronger. His cheeks were full, his eyes bright, his breathing easy and unlabored. The medication had worked. The follow-up care had worked. The fear that once haunted their nights had faded into memory. He grinned at her. "Big presentation today, right? Future Dr. Johnson?" Amara laughed, shaking her head. "Nursing school," she corrected, "and it's just a clinical review." "Still," Malik said proudly, "you save lives." Her throat tightened. She walked over and hugged him, holding on just a second longer than usual. 3 years ago, she hadn't known if he would make it through the winter. Now he was racing toward the door, backpack slung over one shoulder, arguing cheerfully about cereal choices. "Love you," he called. "Love you more," she replied. When the door closed behind him, Amara exhaled slowly. Her life was different now, but she never forgot where it began. After that day at the restaurant, everything had changed, yet nothing had been handed to her without purpose. Jonathan Hale's foundation had done more than cover bills or offer charity. They had offered structure, education, and accountability. Amara had returned to college. It hadn't been easy. She de-studied late into the night, worked part-time at a community clinic, and volunteered every weekend at a food outreach center. She remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and she refused to let others feel that way if she could help it. She grabbed her keys and headed out. Outside, the city looked the same, but she saw it differently now. Not as an enemy, but as a place filled with people quietly fighting battles no one bothered to notice. At the clinic later that afternoon, Amara knelt in front of a little girl clutching a stuffed bear, fear written all over her face. "I don't like shots," the girl whispered. Amara smiled softly. "I know, but I promise you you're stronger than you think." The words weren't just for the child. Across town, in a quiet office overlooking the skyline, Jonathan Hale reviewed a report. One name caught his attention. Johnson, Amara, outstanding clinical performance. He smiled faintly, not because he'd saved someone, but because someone had risen. That evening, Amara stood in front of a small group at the community center. The room was filled with people, young mothers, tired fathers, students, seniors, people who had once looked the way she had looked sitting alone at that restaurant table. She took a breath. "My name is Amara," she began, "and I want to tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner." The room fell silent. "Your worth is not decided by how you're treated in your worst moment," she said, "and needing help does not make you weak." Some nodded, some wiped their eyes. She continued. "There was a time when I was humiliated in public, judged without mercy, while people watched in silence. What hurt most wasn't the words, it was the quiet." Her voice stayed steady. "But one person spoke up," she said, "and that changed everything." She looked around the room. "Be that person," she finished. "And when you need help, don't be ashamed to ask." Applause filled the room, not loud, not performative, real. Later that night, Amara sat on her balcony, the city lights flickering below. She held a cup of tea in her hands, the same kind she used to stretch across 2 cups when money was tight. She thought back to that day, the waiter's voice, the spilled water, the silence, and then the calm voice that said, "That's enough." She smiled softly because the truth was simple. Kindness costs nothing. Silence costs everything. Moral: never judge someone by where they stand today. You don't know the storm they walked through to get there. Compassion has the power to change lives, but only if someone is brave enough to show it. If this story moved you, please like the video, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness matters, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful, real-life inspired stories that remind us what humanity looks like at its best. Because one voice can change everything.